There it goes. So today's our last class of the year, because next Friday is Shavuot, the first day of Shavuot, so it's Yom Tov. We're getting into what will be perhaps mind-numbingly boring listing of boundaries of all the tribes and their portions in the land of Israel. So we might be able to get through it quickly, but there is, as you'll see, there is commentary below the line. So there is something to say about these places. So Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shekidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So we're on page 85 in our books. So I guess let me read. Looks like the first break is after verse 12. So I'll read 1 through 12. I'm really sorry about this. Okay, should be fine now. Vayehi hagoral lemate b'nei Yehuda lemishpachotam el gevul Edom midbar tzin negba miktzei Teman. So the lot for the tribe of the people of Judah, for their families, was to the boundary of Edom in Midbar Tzin, to the south, at the edge of the south. Yeah, southward at the uttermost part of the south. Okay. Vayehi lahem gevul negev miktzei yam hamelach min halashon haponet negba. And so their southern border should be at the edge of the Dead Sea, from the bay or the tongue that points south. So if you look at a map of the Dead Sea, I'm just getting my Eitz Chaim off my table, and we look, see what it's saying, what this lashon is, this tongue. Let's find the map. Here we go. So is it, it's well, I guess they have a sense of what the Dead Sea looked like in the time of the Bible. Now the Dead Sea is kind of cut off into two parts. If you happen to have Eitz Chaim, look at the third map, and you'll see like there's something jutting into the Dead Sea from the Jordanian side, and the Dead Sea continues below that. So I think right on this map, it says Edom right on the bottom of it, and the tribe of Shimon, which is incorporated into Judah, is right there. If you just extend from the J of Judah to the Dead Sea. So I don't know, you're not going to be able to, well, I guess you can see it a little bit, okay? So here's the bottom of the Dead Sea right here, and the name Judah is written up sideways over there, okay? So, V'yatsa el minegev lema'alei akrabim v'avar tzina Va'ala minegev lekadesh barnea va'avar chetzron va'ala adara v'nasav hakar ka'a. So then it goes, the boundary goes southward to the high place of Akrabim, and then it goes to Tzin, and then it goes up from the south to Kadesh Barnea, and goes to Chetzron, and goes up to Adar, and then goes to Karka. Va'avar atzmona ve'yatsa nachal Mitzrayim ve'hayu. Supposed to be the asterisk there leads to the small print that says, even though it looks like the word ve'haya, it's supposed to be pronounced ve'hayu. Totzot ha'gevul yama ze yelachem gevul negev. So then it went from Atzmon and goes to the river of Egypt. and then the goings of the boundary westward, that will to the sea itself, that will be the southern border of Judah. Ugavul Kedma Yam Hamelach Ad Kitsei Hayardain Ugavul Lifat Safona Milashon Hayam Miktsei Hayardain. So the eastern border would be the Dead Sea to the edge of Jordan, or even to the end of the Jordan. So all of the Dead Sea. And the boundary northward will be from the top of the sea, or the bay of the sea. It's the same word for the southern boundary of the Dead Sea. So that top part of the Dead Sea at the edge of the Jordan. Va'alah ha'gavul beit Chagla, va'avar mitzvon leveit ha'arava, va'alah ha'gavul Even Bohan ben Reuven. So then the boundary goes up to Beit Chogla, and then goes northward to Beit Arava, and the boundary continues to Evan, or the stone of Bohan, the son of Reuven. So I guess there'll be commentary about who Bohan, the son of Reuven, is. Va'alah ha'gavul devira me'emek Ahur, v'tzafona poneh el ha'gilgal, Asher nochach lema'alei adumim, Asher minegev lanachal, va'avar ha'gavul el mei ein shemesh, v'hayu totzaotav el ein rogel. Excuse me. Then the boundary continues to Devere from the valley of Achor and northward, turning to the Gilgal, that is over against Ma'ale Adumim. There is a Ma'ale Adumim today, right outside Jerusalem, like from Jerusalem on the way to the Dead Sea. As soon as you're outside the Jerusalem, you get to Ma'ale Adumim. And there has been talk over the years of incorporating Ma'ale Adumim into the boundaries of the Jerusalem municipality. Yes, Bess?
What's Ma'ale?
Ma'ale is the heights. So literally means the heights. So there was a Ma'ale in verse 3, Ma'ale Akrabim. It says the ascent of Akrabim. So it's the heights. So so I don't know if the current Ma'ale Adumim is this Ma'ale Adumim. I'm not sure about that. To Ma'ale Adumim, which is south of the river, and then the boundary passes to the waters of Ein Shemesh, and then it goes out to Ein Rogel. There is an Ein Rogel in Israel today, but again, these place names are so, it's trying to be specific, and it's based on the idea that we know these places, right? So in other words, it would be like as if someone was writing down the boundary of Olney today. It goes from Norbeck Road, or from Emery Lane on the south, westward to Kishel Road, and then northward to I don't know, Route 108, et cetera, et cetera. So it assumes that people know what we're talking about. And if you're not from the area, then you have no idea. But you can look it up on a map because it's all on the map. The problem is there are no maps in the time of Joshua. People either knew or you didn't know. Verse 8, Va'alah ha'gavul gei ven hinom el ketef hayavusi mi Negev hi Yerushalayim ve'alah ha'gavul el rosh hahar asher al penei gei hinom yama asher biktsei emek refaim safona. So the boundary goes to the valley of Hinnom, which today is between the old city and the Mount of Olives. All right, so if you could picture in your mind's eye the Mount of Olives, and you can picture then there's a slope of the Mount of Olives that then goes up on the eastern side of the old city. So if you could walk it, you could walk it. You can walk in the Hinnom Valley there. So that's where it is. It's talking about how then the boundary. So the boundary goes in that Hinnom Valley to the shoulder of the Jebusites, or the side of the Jebusites, southward, which is Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is not part of Judah's territory because the Jebusites control Jerusalem. So, but the people of Judah will control the valley. And then the boundary goes up to the top of the mountain, which is against Gehinnom. I guess that's the Mount of Olives. Westward. So I don't know. I can't. How much of that hilltop was Jerusalem at the time of Joshua, and how much of it is it today? So I don't know how much of that hilltop was Jebusite control. So then they have the mountain, which is on the edge of the valley of Rephaim northward. So if you picture Emek Rephaim today, Emek Rephaim is a street in Jerusalem that comes from the train station, the old train station that's not in use anymore. That's right. So if you can kind of picture in your mind's eye where Emek Rephaim Street is today, it's based on this valley that it's built in that leads to the old city. Okay, 9. Yes.
Isn't it hard to keep a valley safe if the heights are in the possession?
Could be. They could be shot at all the time with stones and arrows and whatnot. Maybe, yeah. So this is the territory. Whether they can control the whole thing is another question. And they don't get Jerusalem until the book of Samuel. In the time of David, when he defeated the Jebusites, because his capital, King David's capital, was in Hebron, and for 7 years, and then it was 33 years in Jerusalem. But v'ta'ar hagavul me rosh har el mayan me neftoach v'yatsa el arei har Ephron v'ta'ar hagavul ba'ala hi kiryat yarim, and then the border was drawn from the top of the mountain to the spring of Nephtoach, and then it went to the cities of Mount Ephron, and the border was drawn to Baal, which is Kiryat Yearim. V'nasav hagavul mi Baala Yama el Har Seir, Ve'avar el Ketef Har Yarim mitzafona hi Chesalon ve'yarad Beit Shemesh ve'avar Timna. So then the boundary turned and went from Baala westward to Mount Seir, and went to the side of Mount Yearim from the north, which is Kesalon. And then it goes down to Beit Shemesh and went to Timnah. V'yatsa hagavul el ketef Ekron safona, v'ta'ar hagavul shikrona, v'avar har habala v'yatsa Yavneel, v'hayu totzaot hagavul yama. So then the boundary went to the side of Ekron northward, and then the boundary was drawn to Shikron, and went to Baala, to Mount Baala, and then went to Yavneel, and then these are how the border went westward, or to the sea. Ugavul Yam Hayama Hagadol ugvul zeh gvul b'nei Yehuda saviv l'mishpachotam. And then the western boundary is the Great Sea, and this boundary is the boundary of the people of Judah, all around according to their families. Okay, so the commentary on this part, back to 85, roughly the inheritance of Judah extended from the north of the Dead Sea to the Mediterranean on the south, along the shore of the to the Mediterranean on the south along the shore of the Dead Sea, and continuing towards Kadesh Barnea, and thence westward to the Wadi of El Arish. This verse gives the boundaries in general terms, which the following verses describe in detail. According to their families, see 13:15. To the border of Edom, the region of Mount Seir in the southeast. The wilderness of Tzin in the southwest corner of Canaan. It's the northern portion of the wilderness of Paran. The bay, literally the tongue, that is, from the narrow tip of the Dead Sea in the southeast, whence it expands tongue-shaped. So I don't, picturing the Dead Sea, it doesn't seem like it's a tongue shape to me, but okay. The ascent of Akrabim, that is Scorpion's Pass, identified by some as Aqaba. Others identified as a city of Akraba, known during the Second Commonwealth as an Idumean city. For other theories, see Dot Mikra. All right, so in other words, people have no idea and are suggesting if they're saying Aqaba today is the Jordanian city that's right next to Eilat. So that can't be for this boundary, because the boundary here doesn't go south of Dead Sea all the way to the Red Sea. It just doesn't do that. So Akrabim has to be something else. Tzin, that is the wilderness of that name. Kadesh Barnea, see 1041. Chetzron, in the extreme south of the territory of Judah. Adar, named Chatzar Adar in Numbers 34, on the southern boundary of Canaan. Karka, only mentioned here, unidentified, but also in the extreme south. Atzmon, Ein Kusame, east of Kadesh. The brook of Egypt, see 13:3. This shall be your south border, an expression conveying the finality of the arrangement, like Leroy Levul. I have no idea. If I were in 8th grade, I could read French, but I can't read it anymore, which signifies the royal assent to a bill and gives it the force of law. It is the phrase copied from Numbers 34, where the phrase is frequent. The bay, see on verse 2. Beit Chogla, literally house of a partridge, the modern Ein Hajla. Beit Araba, literally house of depression, the site is unknown. Some believe it to be located near Ein El Araba, next to Wadi El Kilt in the plains of Jericho.
The word for depression, a physical concavity, the same as a mental sadness? Is it the same depression?
You'd have to look up in the English dictionary why that is.
Okay.
The stone of Bohan, the son of Reuben. The place was called Eben, and it was owned by one Bohan, the son of Reuben, not of the tribe of Reuben. Perhaps there was a stone of sufficient size and importance to serve as a landmark, hence the name Even, meaning stone. Some conjecture that scripture refers to Hajar al-Atzba, the finger rock, in the environs of Jericho. The location, according to Hershkovitz, may have been the modern Nebi Musa, which is that of Moses' tomb in Arab tradition. Devere, not the same as the city of this name mentioned in chapter 10. The valley of Ahor, see on chapter 7. Gilgal, this is not Joshua's base near Jericho. In chapter 18, it's called Gililot. Since there were several places named Gilgal, scripture identifies its location.
Jonah?
Yes.
Your translation is slightly different. The There was a son of Reuben, but not of the tribe of Reuben?
Right. So Reuben could be a
How's that?
name for anybody, not
Or could be some other Reuben.
correct. That's what it means. Yeah. The ascent of Adumim, this is identified with Tala'at Ed Dum, ascent of blood. This Gilgal is located opposite the ascent up the mountain on the road between Jericho and Jerusalem. Next to the ascent are red stones which contain phosphates. Ein Shemesh, literally the spring of the sun, possibly a spring which was the scene of sun worship by the Canaanites. Some theorize that this refers to the spring on the side of the highway between Jericho and Jerusalem, known today as Ein al-Hafz. Ein Shemesh was probably the city, and the waters of Ein Shemen were the spring in its environs. Ein Rogel, a spring southeast of Jerusalem, perhaps with the original meaning of the Fuller's Spring, now called the Spring of Job. It is mentioned again in chapter 8 as situated upon the boundary between Judah and Benjamin. We're on 87. The border went up from Ein Rogel towards Jerusalem, which stands on hills. The valley of the son of Hinnom. This may be one of three possible valleys south of Jerusalem, namely the Wadi Er Rababi, the Tiropoion, and the Kidron, but probably the first. Later, it was associated with human sacrifices, whence its name. Gehinnom, more familiarly Gehenna, came to denote the place of torment of souls. It was traditionally regarded as the entrance to Gehinnom. Put an end to the abominations, Josiah defiled the area. Yeah. So the Hebrew term or the Aramaic term Gehenna or Gehinnom is found from this place where human sacrifices were done, and it became symbolic, the name for hell. The side of the Jebusite, the western hill of Jerusalem, part of which lies today within the walls of the old city. It includes the Jaffa Gate and the Tower of David. Joshua penetrated, but did not subjugate it, so that the Israelites and Jebusites dwelt in it. It was not finally conquered until the time of David. The Vale of Rephaim to the southwest of Jerusalem and now includes the district of Mekor Chaim and the railway station on the north. The verse accordingly includes the hill west of the old city, where now stand the King David Hotel and the districts of Rehavia and Talbia. Was drawn, better inclined, ta'ar being regarded as a form of the root tur, turnabout. The fountains of the waters of Nephtoach. According to Rashi, this was the fountain known as Ein Etam. This fount was 23 ells higher than the floor of the temple court and was the source of the high priest's immersion water on Yom Kippur. Mount Ephron on the northern boundary of Judah, not mentioned elsewhere. Ba'ala, now Kiryat El Enab, near Jerusalem. Kiryat Yarim, see on chapter 9, literally city of the forests. Remains of these forests are still there. Mount Seir, it is obvious that this is not the Seir of Edom, but a mountain in Judah. Rabbi Elijah of Vilna, known as the Vilna Gaon, remarked that as Seir is connected with Sair, hairy, it was a place thickly covered with reeds and shrubs, like a long-haired person. Beit Shemesh, page 88, literally house of the sun, also called Ir Shemesh, city of the sun, now the ruins of Ein Shems, some 7 miles from Ekron. Here at Ein Shems are the vestiges of a former extensive city, consisting of many fountains and the remains of ancient walls of hewn stone. Timnah, southwest of Beit Shemesh, it was the scene of an episode in the life of Samson. Ekron, see on chapter 13:3. Shikaron on the northwest border of Judah, otherwise unknown. Yavneel, near Ekron, between Jaffa and Ashdod, 4 miles inland. In 2 Chronicles, it's named Yavne. After the destruction of the Second Temple in 70, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai founded there a rabbinical academy, which under the name of Yavne or Yamnia became famous as the religious and national center of the Jewish people for a time. It's now a large Arab village called Yibne. The Great Sea, the Mediterranean. So let's go to ancient Israel, page 69. The portion, the Hebrew goral means lot, evidently an aleatory device used to portion out the various territories. And through metonymy, it also means that it is what is indicated by the lot, the portion or share. Southward to the border of Edom, what begins here and runs through the chapters, an elaborate geographical tracing of Judah's tribal territory. The general reader can scarcely be expected to follow all these details, and any reader would need a complicated map to do it. What is noteworthy is the inordinate amount of space devoted to Judah's possessions, which appear to cover most of central and southern Israel from the Jordan to the Mediterranean. As many scholars have inferred, this account probably reflects a later period, maybe 7th century, when a centralized monarchy coming from the tribe of Judah governed the entire southern kingdom with Jerusalem as its capital. The towns in this list are so numerous that many of them are probably not much bigger than substantial villages. Some of the names are well known, can be confidently located, and are sites of important biblical events. Others remain elusive. The bottom of 70, Baalah, which is Kiryat Yearim. This, like at least one other item on the list, cites first an old pagan name and then its replacement, which means forest city. Okay, so let's go on. We can do 13 through 20. Yep. Oh, Kalev ben Yefuneh Natan Chelek betoch bnei Yehuda El Pi Adonai LiYehoshua et Kiryat Arba Avi Ha'anak Hi Hebron. And to Caleb, son of Yefuneh, was given a portion within the people of Judah, according to the word of God to Joshua, was given Kiryat Arba, who was the father of the giant, which is Hebron. Veyoresh misham Kalev et shlosha b'nei ha'anak et Sheshai ve'et Achiman ve'et Talmai yelidei ha'anak. And Caleb drove out from there the 3 sons of the giant, which are Sheshai and Achiman and Talmai, the children of the giant, or the Anak. 15, Vaya'al Misham El Yoshvei Devir, B'Shem Devir Lefanim Kiryat Sefer. And from there from there he went up to the inhabitants of Devir, and the name of Devir before that was Kiryat Sefer. Vayomer Kalev, Asher Yakeh et Kiryat Sefer Ulechada, Benatanti lo et achsa viti leisha. And Caleb said, whoever would defeat Kiryat Sefer and take it, I'll give him my daughter Achsa as a wife. Vayil keda Otniel ben Kenaz, achi Kalev, vayiten lo et Achsa vito leisha. And so the one to do this, to take Kiryat Sefer, was Otniel, the son of Kenaz, who is the brother of Caleb. So his nephew Otniel, and so he gave him his daughter Achsa for a wife. So they're cousins, according to this. So Otniel and Achsa married, and they're cousins, first cousins, which is okay according to Jewish law. 18, Vayehi bevoa vatesitehu lishol me'et aviha sadeh vatitznach me'ala chamor vayomer la Kalev malach. And it came to pass when she came to him that she persuaded him to ask of her father a field. And she alighted from off her donkey, and Caleb said to her, Malach, like, what's up? 19, Vatomer Tanali Bracha, Ki Eretz HaNegev netatani, Venatatali Gulot Mayim, V'iten la et Gulot Iliot, Ve'et Gulot Tachtiot. She said, give me a blessing for what you have sent me in the Southland, in the south. Give me some springs of water. And he gave her the upper springs and the lower or nether springs. It says here the under springs. Zot nachalat mate b'nei Yehuda lemishpachotam. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the people of Judah according to their families. So now let's see what this little side story of Caleb and his daughter and son-in-law. Let's see what the commentary has to say about this section. So we're back to 88 on 13 in the commentary. Unto Caleb. See on 14, Joshua did not take it upon himself to grant Caleb's request, but consulted the oracle. Kiryat Arba, see on 14. And Caleb drove out, that is, after Joshua's death. For Hebron was not taken during Joshua's lifetime, as is stated in Judges 1. So in other words, this is added later after Joshua died, according to Rashi. Sheshai, etc., see Numbers 13. Kiryat Sefer on 89, it appears that Scripture distinguishes between the ancient city housing the fortress known as Kiryat Sefer and the newer sections augmented to the city known by the new name of Devir. For this reason, Caleb says in the following verse, he that smites Kiryat Sefer. The city is also known as Kiryat Sanah, further in verse 49. The rabbis state that book, Sefer, is called Devir in Persian. The same is true in the Canaanite tongue. So Sefer and Devir are interchangeable words in different languages. 16, verses 16 to 19 are repeated in Judges 1, 12 to 15, which is interesting. So why it's repeated here or repeated in Judges? To him will I give, etc. Saul made a similar promise when fighting against the Philistines. That is from his mother. Following the death of Caleb's father, Yefuneh, his mother married Kenaz, from whom she bore Othniel. Since Caleb was raised in the household of Kenaz, he is also known as the Kenizzite. Kimchi and Abarvanel state that the family name was Kenizzite after its progenitor, Kenaz. Thus, Caleb and Othniel were full brothers. So there are different stories then about who this Kenaz was. When she came unto him, the words unto him are not in the Hebrew. A proposed interpretation is when she came to her husband's house. A field in Judges 1, the noun has the definite article, that is the adjoining land, which has a source of water. What wouldst thou? Apparently, Othniel refused to ask for it, so she sprang down from the ass herself, which surprised Caleb into asking his question. Blessing, page 90, that is a gift. The Southland, Hebrew, the land of the Negev, that is a dry land. The upper springs, the nether springs, welling up in the hill and plain, respectively. So now in ancient Israel, on page 70, Caleb. He was the other one of the 12 spies, besides Joshua, who brought back an encouraging report about the land, and Hebron with the surrounding territory was to be his reward.
So,
yes.
I'm thinking, shouldn't Kenaz not be alive? Because it should only be Joshua and Caleb would be from before.
No, well, Othniel is the one who's alive. That doesn't necessarily, just because he's the son of Kenaz, Doesn't mean he's alive, that Kenaz is alive. It's just saying that he's Othniel, son of Kenaz. Othniel, he is to become the first of the judges. She enticed him to ask a field of her father. The Septuagint, that's the Greek translation, reads, he enticed her, which makes the sequence of events easier to follow, but perhaps one should hew to the philological principle of adopting the more difficult reading. In that case, Achsa enticed her husband, but then did the asking herself, perhaps because Othniel's request was rebuffed. Present, more literally, blessing. Desert land and the Hebrew Negev land, the Negev serving as the model for arid country. The term is associated by etymology with dryness. So he doesn't add anything about this story and why it's here and also in Judges. So we don't know, and maybe when we get to Judges, we'll remember this, and maybe there'll be commentary there about back to Joshua. All right, let's do 21 to the end of the chapter. A lot more place names. Vayihiyu he'arim miksei lamate b'nei Yehuda el gevul Edom b'negba kavtze'el v'ader v'yagur. And the cities at the edge of the tribe of Judah, to the boundary with Edom in the south, Kavtze'el and Eder and Yagur. The Kina v'Dimona v'Ad Ada. And Kina and Dimona, there is a city of Dimona today. That's where Israel's nuclear reactor is. V'Ad Ada. V'Kedesh v'Chatzor v'Yitnan. So now I'm not going to translate because these are all place names. Zif v'Telam uve'alot. V'Chatzor Chadata v'Kiryot Chetzron. Chatzor. So Kiryat Chetzron is also Chatzor. Amam u'Shema u'Molada, v'Chatzar Gada, v'Cheshmon u'Veit Palet, v'Chatzar Shu'al u'Ve'er Sheva u'Bizyotya, Ba'ala v'Iyim v'Atzim, ve'El Tolad u'Kesil v'Chorma, u'Vetziklag v'Umadmana v'San Sana, Ulevaot v'Shilchim v'Ayin v'Rimon Kol Arim Esrim v'Teisha v'Chatzreihen. All the cities, 29, and their environs or their villages. Bashpela, in the valley, the coastal plain, Eshtaol v'Tzara v'Ashna, v'Zanoach v'Ein Ganim Tapuach v'Ha'enam, Yarmut v'Adulam, Shtocha v'Azeka, v'Sha'arayim v'Adidatayim v'Hagedera u'Gederotayim Arim Arba Esrei v'Chatzreihen. These cities were 14 and their villages. Sinan v'Chadasha u'Migdal Gad v'Dil'an v'Hamitzpeh v'Yakte'el Lachish u'Vatzkat v'Eglon v'Chabon v'Lachmas v'Chitlish Ugederot Beit Dagon v'Naama u'Makeda Arim Sheshesrei v'Chatzreihen. An additional 16 cities and their villages. Livna v'Eter v'Ashan v'Yiftach v'Ashna u'Netziv u'Ki'ila v'Achziv u'Maresha Arim Tesha v'Chatzreihen. These are 9 more cities and their villages. Ekron uvenoteha v'chatzereha. So Ekron with its towns and its villages. Me Ekron v'yama kol asher al yad Ashdod v'chatzreihen. From Ekron westward, all that was next to Ashdod and their villages. Ashdod benoteha v'chatzereha, Aza benoteha v'chatzereha, Ad Nachal Mitzrayim v'Hayam Hagadol u'Gevul. So Ashdod and its towns and villages, Gaza and its towns and villages, until the river of Egypt and the Great Sea is the boundary. Uvahar Shamir Vayatir Vesocha, and in the hill country now, more cities. Vedana vekiryat sana he devir. So right here's Kiryat Sana as opposed to Kiryat Sefer, which is also devir. Ve'ana ve'eshtemo ve'anim. The Goshen, the Cholon, the Gilo, Arim, Achadesre v'chatzrehen. So here in the hill country, you got 11 cities and their villages. Arav ve'duma ve'eshan. Ve'yanum uve tapuach va'afeka. Ve'chumta ve'kiryat arba hi Chevron. Vetzior Arim Tesha v'chatzrehem. Ma'on Carmel v'Zif v'Yutah. V'Yisrael v'Yakda'am v'Zanoach. Hakayim Giv'ah v'Timna Arim Eser v'chatzrehem. So you have 10 more cities and their villages. Chalchul Beit Sur Ugedor. Uma'arat Beit Anot v'El Tekon. Arim Sheish v'chatzrehen. So 6 more cities and their villages. Kiryat Baal he Kiryat Yarim v'Haraba Arim Shtaim v'chatzrehen. 2 more cities and their villages. Bamidbar in the wilderness, Beit Ha'arava Midin u'Sechacha v'ha Nivshan v'Ir Hamelach v'Ein Gedi Arim Sheish v'chatzrehen. 6 more cities in the wilderness. And their villages. Ve'et haYevusi Yoshvei Yerushalayim Yo Lo Yuchlu Bnei Yehuda Lahorisham Vayeshev haYevusi Et Bnei Yehuda BiYerushalayim Ad Hayom Hazeh. So the Jebusite and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the Jebusites, which were the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the people of Judah were not able to drive out. And the Jebusites dwelled with the people of Judah in Jerusalem until this day. Okay, so all the commentary on this, beginning on the bottom of 90.
Jonah?
Yes, Pastor.
I'm a little confused still. These umpteen towns with the villages,
Yes.
these were apportioned to the, as described.
The tribe of Judah.
Right, but they were inhabited when they were apportioned?
No. I think we were just told in the chapters before that all the inhabitants were driven out and they got what's left, the shell, which is the town itself.
Okay, that's what I didn't remember. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Judah's territory was divided into 4 main regions: the Negev in the south, the Shpela, the lowland in the west, the Har, the hill country in the center, and the Midbar, the wilderness in the east. Kabzeel, this name occurs in 2 Samuel, in Nehemiah, and in 1 Chronicles. The site has not been discovered. Eder, perhaps the present ruins of Adar, about 4 miles south of Gaza. Yagur, otherwise unknown. When this applies to other place names in the following lists, they are not mentioned in the commentary. Dimona, perhaps the same as Dibon in Nehemiah 11, identified by some with Tel Ed Deheb. Adada, perhaps Bir El Uded, south of Kadesh Barnea. Kedesh, some identify this with Kedesh mentioned in Numbers 20, located at the border of Edom. Others maintain that they are distinct of each other and that the location of this one is unknown. Hatzor, not the same town as that in chapter 11. Tzif, not the same as Tzif of verse 55. Baalot, it perhaps occurs again in 1 Kings. Hatzor, different from the town named in verse 23. Keriot, some identify it with the ruins of El Kiryatin, south of Maon. Beit Pelet, I'm on page 91, known also as at the time of the return to Zion as a city settled by the returnees from Babylonia. Its location is not known definitely. Some conjecture, however, that it is identified with Tel El Meshash, 5 kilometers east of Beersheba. Chatzar Shual, mentioned again in Nehemiah, 1 Chronicles, included among the cities of Shimon. Beersheba, either the Well of 7 or the Well of the Oath from Genesis. It lay in the extreme south, so that coupled with Dan in the north, it described the complete length of the land. from Dan even to Beersheba, as an example from 2 Samuel. It was a very ancient city, first mentioned in connection with Abraham. Later, it was the judicial seat of Samuel's son. Still later, in the time of Amos, it was the site of an idolatrous cult. It still retains its name in the modern form of Bir Es Seba, or Beersheba today. Ba'alah, see on verse 9. Etzem, a Shemonite town. El Tolad, a Shemonite city, probably identical with Tolad. Chasil, a comparison with the parallel passage in 19, suggests that Chasil is identical with Betul, mentioned there. It may have been the shrine of the constellation Chasil, that is Orion, from Job. Chorma, see on chapter 12. Ziklag, this town came into prominence later when Achish, king of Gath, into whose possession it had passed in the meantime, presented it to David. During David's absence with Achish, the Amalekites raided and burnt it. Some authorities think that it stood on the site of Zuhelika, 11 miles southeast of Gaza. Others identify it with Tel El Kuelthe, between Zuhelika and Beersheba. Madmana Demne, about 12 miles northeast of Beersheba. Some regard Madmana and Sansana as epithets of opprobrium applied to the heathen cults which were practiced in these places. Levaot, doubtless the Shemonite city Beit Levaot. Shilchim, Sion Sharuhen, chapter 19. Ain and Rimon, in 19:7, the reading is Ain Rimon without the conjunction, but in 21, Ain occurs as the name of a Levitical city. They were probably situated close together and so reckoned as one place. The modern identification is with Ramamim, 18 miles southwest of Hebron. 20 and 9, in fact, 38 are enumerated. The other 9 are not counted because they were allotted to Shimon, according to Rashi. Others explain that they were mere villages and are therefore not reckoned as towns. Eshtaol, Tzorah, below they are listed among the cities of Dan. Here, the Spirit of the Lord began to move Samson, Judges, and his body was brought for burial. So these towns are listed elsewhere. Ashna, that is, another town of this name is mentioned in verse 43. Sanoah, the modern Sana, occurring again in Nehemiah and in 1 Chronicles. Another place of this name is enumerated in verse 56. Ein Ganim, literally spring of gardens. Gina, a mile southwest of Beit Shemesh. A town of this name was included in territory of Yisachar. Tapuach, not the same as the town in chapter 12. Yarmut, see chapter 10. Adulam, see chapter 12. Soko, the modern Sueka, southeast of Beit Shemesh. Another place of the same name was in the hill country. Azekah, see chapter 10. 14 cities, 15 places are enumerated. Rashi maintains that Einam in verse 34 was not a separate town, but a suburb of Tapuach, the sense being Tapuach and its well, while Kimchi considers Gedera and Gederotayim in this verse to be identical. Sanan, perhaps identical with Sa'anan in Micah. Migdal Gad, perhaps the modern Mejdel east of Ashkelon. Lachish, see chapter 10. Boskat, the home of Josiah's mother in 2 Kings. Eglon, see chapter 10. Lachmas, this reading with the final S is supported by the transcription in some ancient versions. Many Hebrew manuscripts read Lachmam. In any case, it may be the modern El Lachem, about 13 miles northwest of Hebron. Beit Dagon, literally house of Dagon, the fish god worshipped by the Philistines. Many towns in western Palestine bore that name. For example, a town assigned to Asher in chapter 19. And there is still a village called Beit Digjan near the Jewish city of Rishon LeZion. The Beit Dagon in this verse was more to the south near Lachish, and its exact site is not known. Libnah, see on chapter 10. Eter, assigned to Shimon, perhaps the modern Er, 2 miles northwest of Beit Jibrin. Ashan, included in the cities of Shimon. Netziv, the modern Beit Nasiv, 8 miles northwest of Hebron. Keilah, now Tel Kila, about 8 miles northwest of Hebron. It appears in the history of David. And after the massacre of the priests of Nob, it became the depository of the sacred ephod, the priestly garment. Achziv, possibly identical with Kaziv in Genesis 38, which may be Ein El Kezbe near Soko. Others maintain that its site was out at Tel Bezeh, northwest of Keilah. It occurs again in Micah 1. Maresha, its remains have been found at Tel Sandahane, now Merash. It was fortified by Rehoboam. Josephus names it Marissa, a town captured by Judah Maccabee. Cities on the coast: Ekron, C13, Ashdod, C13, Gaza, C41. Cities of the hill country: Shamir, now the ruins of Somerah, northeast of El Ein Rimon. Yatir, a Levitical city, probably the same as the place name in 1 Samuel. Soko, see verse 35, now the ruins of Sueka, north of Yatir. The same as Devir, see verse 15. Anab, see verse 20, chapter 11. Eshtamot, doubtless the same as the Levitical city, Eshtemoa, mentioned again in 1 Samuel. Anim, perhaps the modern Guwain, 17 miles southwest of Hebron. Goshen, see chapter 10. Holon, a Levitical city, conjectured to be the ruins of Alin, northwest of Halhul. Gilo, again in 2 Samuel. Rumah, according to another reading, Duma, the modern Dalma, southwest of Hebron. Beit Tapuach and Afekah, not the same as Tapuach and Afek in chapter 12. Kiryat Arba, see chapter 14. Seor, perhaps Sa'ir, 5 miles northeast of Hebron. Ma'on, the hometown of Naval, the modern Ma'in, 8 miles south of Hebron. Sif, now Tel Zif, southeast of Hebron. Utah, one of the Levitical cities. Jezreel, the town of Achinoam, wife of David, otherwise unknown. Sanoach, perhaps Sanuta, southwest of Hebron. Cain, or is a Cain, the Hebrew reads Ha-Cain, the Cain, possibly Yukin, southeast of Hebron. Gibeah, not the oft-mentioned city of that name in the portion of Benjamin, it may be the village of Gabah near Hebron. Timnah, not the place named in verse 10, but that mentioned in Genesis 38, south of Hebron. Halhul, it still bears that name, about 3 miles north of Hebron. Beit Sur, 12 miles south of Jerusalem, prominent in the Maccabean Wars. Beit Anot, now Beit Anun, southwest of Jerusalem. Kiryat Yarim, see on chapter 9. Rabbah, of unknown location, not the same as Rabbah of chapter 13. Beit Arava, see verse 6, the city of salt. It probably received its name from the salt of the Dead Sea and has been identified with Qumran to its northwest. Ein Gedi, literally the spring of the goat, now Ein Gedi, on the western shore of the Dead Sea. It is a famous desert site in the desert of Judea, also called Hatzatzon Tamar in Genesis. The Amorites dwelt there in Abraham's time. Okay.
So does that mean that En Gedi changed its name and then changed its name back again to En Gedi?
I think so, yes.
Okay. And Lachish, wasn't he like a rabbi in Eastern Europe? Am I confused, or did they just?
There's a Talmudic rabbi, Reish Lakish, with a K. This is Kish. So there's just a little bit of commentary, page 72 in ancient Israel. Ekron, Ashdod, these towns like Gaza and Ashdod in the next verse are Philistine cities. They could scarcely have been allotted to Judah in the 13th century, though by the time this list was compiled, the Philistines had long been vanquished. But the Jebusites, the inhabitants in Jerusalem, the Judahites were not able to dispossess. The writer is obliged to make this notation because it was well known that Jerusalem remained in Jebusite hands until David conquered it more than 2 centuries after the time of Joshua. And the Jebusites have dwelled alongside the Judites to this day. This second clause is somewhat misleading after the first clause. It could not mean, as it may appear, that the Jebusites were never conquered, but rather that after having been
Nope.
conquered,
Okay, I have to
David,
finish this in another minute.
that rather after having been conquered by David, many of them remained as landholding residents of the city. See the account of David's purchase of the threshing floor of Arona, the Jebusite, for use as a cultic site in 12 Samuel. In chapter 1 of 2 Samuel, no, what does that mean? I think in 2 Samuel 24, he buys it and does not take it by right of conquest. Okay, so that was chapter 15. That's it for today. We'll continue in September. Probably, I think, is there a Friday before Labor Day weekend? The Friday of, maybe the Friday of Labor Day weekend, we can begin again. I'll email everybody and let everybody know. Take care, everybody. And
Thank you.
an early Chag Sameach for next week, and Shabbat Shalom.
And good, thank you. Thank you. Have a good summer.
You too.